We're almost finished removing all the external components from our Mack MP7. Let's see if we can't finish it up this episode. There's honestly not much left on the outside of the engine. It's just the tandem fuel and power steering pump, as well as the air compressor and a few miscellaneous lines. The compressor on this engine mounts directly to the gear housing on 3 studs, followed by cap nuts to hold it in place. It's a Wapco compressor and it receives its input power from the rear gear train. The compressor gets its own oil supply, which is that small little pipe on the front of it. The oil returns to the sump via a few ports behind the compressor gear that will dump the oil back through the timing gear housing. Anytime you're removing something on studs like this, it's helpful to remove the nut to the last couple threads of the stud, and that way, when the compressor does pop out, it won't fall to the floor, and instead the nuts will catch it. Check out here how when I go to remove this oil feed line, the entire fitting on the compressor side comes with it. This is critical because if I were to continue to remove this like this, that entire line I would totally destroy. So what I'll do instead is I'll lock the fitting on the bottom of the compressor, and then I'll break free the collar nut with another wrench. The reason why these lines will get destroyed is because even though they may look soft and flexible, the interior is usually lined with a braided hose, and that means that if it gets kinked, it stays kinked and will disrupt the pressure. While there is an O-ring behind this compressor, a lot of the times they are sealed with silicone, causing them to hang up inside the timing gear housings like this, but a couple of slaps on the side of the compressor head will usually give you enough space that you could get something in between and free the compressor completely. The next thing we're going to do is remove the tandem power steering fuel pump that's located beneath the compressor. We've already removed the lines for this while we were disassembling the fuel system, so all we have to do is remove the 3 bolts that hold it into the timing gear housing and pull it straight out. With the tandem pump removed from the engine, we can turn our attention back towards any ancillary pipes and brackets that are left on the cold side of the engine. We'll remove them all, and then we'll head back topside. We're going to begin to remove the rocker shaft, but it's important we do so evenly or else we risk bending the actual shaft because of the tension exerted as we remove the bolts. I like to do this by hand, and then once I know the tension is completely off the shaft, I'll switch over to my impact gun and I'll run out the remaining threads. Even with the tension off the rocker shaft bolts, there's still going to be tension underneath some of those valves as you remove the shaft, so just take caution. As I remove the rocker shaft bolts, I check all the bolt heads for punch markings. That's because these are reusable up to 5 times each, and every time you reuse them, you should punch the marking on the bolt head indicating the number of times it's been reused. Because we're going to be removing this rocker shaft entirely, I'll zip tie the rocker arms together in sets of 3. This way, they won't roll around on each other once I lift the shaft up. The other reason this is important is because just in case something does go wrong and all the rocker arms end up on the floor, the zip ties will keep them in sets that are easy enough to put back together and we won't have to mix and match. Before I go any further, I'd like to give a quick shout out to our sponsor for the first season of Down the Block and Back. Ridemore Heavy Duty Truck Parts is one of the largest used heavy duty demanufacturing facilities specializing in quality used parts for commercial trucks class 7 and 8. And if your market is aftermarket, I have good news for you. Ridemore also stocks a whole plethora of aftermarket parts that are just as good as OEM quality, things like radiators, charged air coolers, rebuild kits, water pumps, flywheel housings, EGR coolers, anything in between. Ridemore pretty much will have you covered. If you're interested, check out their inventory over at ridemore.com or call them directly at 978-342-1100. We'll toss a zip tie on that last set of rocker arms and we're almost ready to lift this shaft up, but before we do that we have to remove the VEB valve, and this means removing the 2 bolts that attach directly to the head, as well as pulling the feed tube out of the end of the rocker shaft. These exhaust brake solenoid valves are responsible for feeding oil to the rocker shaft, which makes reinstallation of them critical, so you have to be confident when you put this thing back together, or else you risk burning out the entire top end of your motor. With that being said, to remove it, give it a quick wiggle and pull it directly out of the end of the rocker shaft. We're just about ready to lift off the rocker shaft here, and they actually make a lifting tool to do this with. However, I don't have it here. This large stick will work just as well though. We'll zip tie the rocker shaft directly to the stick, and then we can lift it up and completely off the engine. I don't want to get too deep into the internals in this video, so we'll cut this one a little bit early, but next time we'll pick up and we'll remove the injectors and we'll start preparing the head to be removed from the engine block. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you next time on Ratchet and Frank TV.